Amaka never liked family gatherings. They were always loud with laughter, heavy with secrets. On this particular evening, the compound was lit with lanterns, and the air smelled of roasted yam and pepper soup. Aunties gossiped, uncles argued politics, children darted between chairs. Amaka sat quietly by the edge, flipping through her worn notebook. She was her father's pride, educated, soft-spoken, with eyes that carried questions most ignored. But then he arrived, Chief Okafor, a man of influence, his agbada sweeping the earth like he owned it, his gold wristwatch catching every flicker of lantern light. People stood when he entered, voices bowing before his presence. His laughter was deep, yet sharp, the kind that dared you to ignore it. Amaka's father hurried to greet him, nerves etched into his smile. Amaka caught the tremor in his hands, and her stomach tightened. Something about the way Chief Okafor's eyes lingered too long on her made her close her notebook and lower her gaze. Later that night, Amaka overheard the whispers. Her father's voice was strained, pleading, "Chief, please, give me more time. The land deal failed, but I will repay." Chief Okafor's reply was silk wrapped around a dagger. "Debt is not patient, my friend, but perhaps another arrangement can be made." His eyes slid toward the shadows where Amaka stood frozen. Her breath caught. She understood then. The debt was too large, the shame too heavy. Chief Okafor did not want land, nor cattle. He wanted her. Fear clawed at her throat. When she retreated into her room, her notebook slipped from her hand, pages scattering like frightened birds. She pressed her face into her palms, whispering, "No, God, not me." Yet deep inside, she knew the storm had already broken. The following evening, Chief Okafor arrived again. This time, he did not come for food or conversation. He came with silence heavy as iron. Amaka's father ushered him into the parlor, sweat glistening on his brow. "My daughter," her father called nervously, "come and greet our guest." Amaka stepped inside, wrapper neatly tied, trying to hide the tremor in her hands. Chief Okafor's gaze swept over her with unsettling calm. "Beautiful," he said softly, as if admiring property. "Your father's debt is substantial, but I am a merciful man. I will erase it all if you become my wife." The word struck Amaka like a slap. She looked at her father, desperate for denial, but saw only shame in his eyes. Her throat burned. Marriage had always been her choice, her dream. Now it was a bargain, and she was the currency. That night, Amaka confronted her father. "Papa, you cannot agree to this." Her voice cracked, half fury, half pleading. Her father lowered his eyes. "Amaka, you know our debts. If I refuse, we lose the house, the land, everything. At least this way, you are cared for." His words were salt to her wound. "Cared for or sold?" she whispered, but his silence answered more than his words. Alone in her room, Amaka pressed her notebook to her chest, as though ink and paper could shield her from the claws of fate. She thought of escape, Lagos perhaps, or hiding with her aunt. But she knew Chief Okafor's reach was long, and his threats longer. She clenched her jaw. If chains were to be placed on her, she would at least learn how to carry them with dignity. The wedding came swiftly, arranged in whispers and shadows. The compound filled with music and colors. But Amaka's heart was heavy as stone. She stood in her bridal lace, coral beads weighing down her neck like chains. Guests clapped, praising Chief Okafor's generosity and wealth. No one saw the tears she fought to hide beneath her veil. When the pastor asked if she would take this man as her husband, her voice nearly broke. "Yes," she whispered, though the word tasted like ash. Chief Okafor's smile was wide, victorious. Cameras flashed, drums pounded, ululations rose. But in Amaka's ears, the world was silent. She had just stepped into a cage disguised as matrimony. Amaka entered Chief Okafor's mansion with her head bowed. Her veil lifted only once the gates closed. The house was sprawling, marble floors, chandeliers, polished wood. But to her it felt like a gilded prison. Servants bowed, whispering congratulations, but their eyes lingered with curiosity. She wanted to scream, "This is no marriage, I am no bride." Chief Okafor led her to a grand bedroom filled with expensive furniture and a bed draped in silk. "Everything here is yours," he said, voice smug. Amaka touched the golden bedpost lightly, her hand cold. "Everything except freedom," she murmured, though not loud enough for him to hear. Days passed like winter in the tropics. Chief Okafor dined at long tables, always at the far end, his laughter booming when business partners visited, yet never reaching Amaka. Alone, she ate quietly, her spoon clinking against china like a faint protest. When he did speak, his words were commands. "Dress well for tonight's guests, smile, sit by my side." At night, Amaka sat by the window, notebook on her lap, writing words she dared not say aloud. Her heart longed for escape, but her pen recorded her quiet rebellion. "I am still Amaka," she wrote. "Not a possession, not a trophy." Yet when she heard his footsteps in the hallway, she shut the book quickly, fear and anger locking hands in her chest. It didn't take long for the city to whisper. "Why does she look so sad?" women asked after spotting Amaka at events, sitting stiffly beside her husband. "Perhaps he forced her," some dared to say. The gossip stung Okafor, though he laughed it off in public. In private, he slammed his fists against polished tables, his pride bruised. One evening, he turned to her suddenly. "People are talking," he growled. "They say you are not a wife, but a hostage. Make them believe otherwise." Amaka's lips pressed thin. "I will not lie for you," she said softly. His hand froze mid-air, trembling with rage, but he lowered it. Even he knew some boundaries could not be crossed without consequence. Amaka's only comfort was her childhood friend, Chinedu, who sometimes visited with her brothers. He spoke gently, reminding her of laughter from simpler days. But Okafor noticed. His eyes narrowed when Chinedu's name was mentioned, his jaw tight whenever Amaka smiled in his presence. That night, Okafor's voice was cold. "Do not shame me with that boy's visits. The world already doubts this marriage. Do not give them reason." Amaka's silence was her only rebellion. She would not beg nor explain. Inside, however, her heart pounded with fear. Okafor was a man who could crush reputations with a whisper, and she knew Chinedu might become a target. One evening after a tense dinner, Amaka retreated to her chamber. She removed her coral beads and stared into the mirror. The reflection frightened her. Eyes dulled, shoulders stooped. She barely recognized the woman staring back. She raised her notebook like a shield and whispered, "I will not vanish. Not for him. Not for anyone." The mirror cracked suddenly. A servant's tray had fallen in the hallway, startling her. But the break across the glass felt symbolic. She touched it, fingertips tracing the split. Perhaps her life was fractured now, but in the cracks, she thought, new light could still shine. One morning, Amaka overheard two of Okafor's business partners arguing in the veranda. "His empire is sinking," one hissed. "Fraud investigations, missing funds. He hides it well, but the walls are crumbling." The other laughed nervously. "He thought marrying that girl would distract us, but it won't save him." Amaka froze, the tray in her hand trembling. That evening, she studied her husband at the dining table. His laughter with guests was forced, his eyes clouded with worry. She realized then the man who caged her was fighting invisible chains of his own. For the first time, pity flickered in her chest, though pride kept her face hard. Later that week, Okafor came home drunk, his steps uneven. Amaka helped him to his chair despite herself. "Why?" he muttered, eyes bloodshot. "Why do you hate me so much?" She stiffened. "You gave me reason." He chuckled bitterly. "Then hate is better than emptiness." For a moment, his voice broke, not in power, but in pain. Amaka looked at him differently then, just for a heartbeat. Behind the arrogance was a man cracking under weight he couldn't bear alone. She turned away quickly, but in the silence between them, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not love, just recognition that chains bound them both. The next day, Amaka walked through the offices of Okafor's company. She had insisted on accompanying him, under the pretense of learning her husband's empire. Secretly, she read ledgers, listening as staff whispered about missing funds and sabotage contracts. Some greeted her coldly, others respectfully, but all were wary. That night, she spread her notes across her desk. Numbers didn't lie, even when men did. She realized Okafor's enemies weren't only outside, they were inside his company, sharpening their knives. For the first time, she felt her education might be more powerful than his gold. One evening, while searching the study, Amaka found letters hidden in Okafor's drawer. They were from his closest partner, signed with respect but laced with betrayal. Promises of loyalty to his face, plans to destroy him behind his back. She pressed the papers to her chest, heart racing. When Okafor entered suddenly, she almost dropped them. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. She steadied her breath. "Saving you," she replied, holding out the letters. His eyes widened, then softened in something close to gratitude. For once, he did not speak as a master, but as a man stunned that someone cared. From that night, something subtle changed. Okafor no longer called her woman or barked orders. He began asking, "What do you think?" At dinners, letting her speak. Though pride made him stiff, his eyes revealed respect creeping in. Amaka, though guarded, answered carefully, her words sharper than he expected. "One evening," he said quietly, "perhaps I needed you." Amaka's lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. She did not reply, but in her heart, a storm swirled. Could this forced marriage, born in blackmail, grow into something neither of them intended? The whispers became war. Anonymous letters arrived at the mansion gate, accusing Okafor of fraud. Newspapers carried headlines about a tycoon under fire. Amaka watched him pace the study, fists clenched, rage barely contained. For the first time, she saw fear lurking beneath his arrogance. That night, as rain lashed the windows, he muttered, "They want my empire. They want me ruined." Amaka touched the incriminating letters she had found earlier. "Then fight smarter, not louder," she said calmly. He looked at her, surprised, not at her words, but at the steel in her voice. Soon, Okafor was summoned to a business forum where rivals hoped to humiliate him. He insisted Amaka accompany him. The hall buzzed with cameras, men in agbadas, women in elaborate jails. Whispers trailed them as they entered. "That's the unhappy wife." Amaka lifted her chin, refusing to shrink. When an opponent mocked Okafor, calling his fortune sandcastles, Amaka stood. "Only a weak man mocks another while hiding behind whispers," she said clearly. The room gasped. For the first time, Okafor's enemies saw a different weapon at his side, his wife's voice. Okafor's lips curved in a rare, proud smile. That night, back at the mansion, Okafor poured himself palm wine, but pushed it aside untouched. "You spoke like fire," he said quietly. "You defended me when you owed me nothing." Amaka sat opposite, her notebook open. "I defended myself too," she replied. "Your shame is tied to my name." He leaned back, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not as property, not as blackmail bride, but as a partner. The silence stretched, heavy yet strangely tender. For a moment it felt like a wall between them had cracked, letting in the faintest light. But enemies strike hardest when cornered. Weeks later, a rival leaked forged documents claiming Okafor had stolen millions. The press swarmed the mansion, cameras flashing. Amaka stood at the gates, reporters shouting, "Did your husband buy you with blackmail?" Her body trembled, but her voice rang steady. "We stand as one. Lies do not shake stone." Inside, Okafor watched from the balcony. He had expected her to hide, to cower. Instead, she faced the storm alone, shielding his name with her courage. For the first time in years, Chief Okafor's eyes filled, not with pride, not with rage, but with something dangerously close to gratitude. That evening, Okafor entered her room without his usual armor of pride. He stood silently for a while, then said, "I have wronged you, yet you shielded me." His voice was hoarse, stripped of command. Amaka closed her notebook slowly. "I did it for myself too. If you fall, I am buried with you." He stepped closer, hesitation softening his powerful frame. "Perhaps we are bound by more than debt now." Their eyes met, hers wary, his uncertain. The air thickened with something neither dared name. For the first time, blackmail felt less like chains and more like a bridge they hadn't chosen to cross, but were already walking. The Council of Investors gathered in a high-rise hall, their voices sharp as cutlasses. Amaka sat silently at the edge while Okafor defended himself. Then a man rose, his closest partner, Chief Okafor, and laid forged evidence on the table. "Behold, proof of his theft!" Gasps filled the room. Okafor's face paled, but Amaka saw the trap. She stood suddenly, voice clear. "These figures are lies. The handwriting, the seals, they are forged." Pulling out notes she had gathered secretly, she laid them beside the forgeries. The elders leaned closer, comparing. Murmurs shifted. Eyes turned from condemnation to suspicion. Not at Okafor, but at Obina. Obina tried to laugh it off. "What does a woman know of business?" But Amaka's eyes blazed. Enough to see a snake shed its skin. Her words cracked like thunder, silencing the hall. She read aloud details of the sabotage. Missing contracts, stolen funds, all traced back to him. The evidence was clear. The investors erupted. Some shouted for Obina's arrest. Others marveled at Amaka's courage. Okafor remained silent, stunned, staring at his wife as if he'd never seen her before. In that moment, the empire he thought was slipping through his fingers was steadied, not by his power, but by hers. Obina fled the hall, chased by security. The newspapers that once mocked Okafor now praised Amaka, the silent bride who spoke. Reporters crowded the mansion gates, not for scandal this time, but to celebrate her. Yet behind the applause, Amaka sat quietly in her room, staring at her notebook. She had not fought for fame. She had fought to be seen. Okafor entered gently. No agbada, no gold watch. Just a man stripped bare. "You saved everything," he whispered. "Even me." Amaka closed the notebook, her hand trembling. "I only told the truth." But his eyes searched hers, as if the truth he sought was more than business. For days, Okafor withdrew from public view, leaving Amaka to hand matters. When he finally spoke, his words were unlike before. "I forced you into this marriage," he admitted, voice low. "But you gave it life. You owe me nothing, yet I owe you everything." His eyes shone, not with pride, but with humility. Amaka's heart raced. For so long she had hated him. But now she saw a man who was broken, remade by fire, kneeling not in power but in sincerity. She reached for his hand slowly. "If we start again, it will be as equals." For the first time, Okafor nodded, not as master, but as partner. Weeks later, they renewed their vows, not in grandeur, but in truth. No crowd, no drums, only family gathered beneath the mango tree. Amaka wore a simple wrapper, her hair tied back, her face radiant not with jewelry, but with freedom. Okafor stood beside her, humbled yet proud, his voice steady as he pledged again. When he slipped a simple band on her finger, he whispered, "No more chains, only choice." Amaka smiled through tears, lifting her hand high. This time, her yes was not ash. It was fire, alive and free. Their false marriage, born in blackmail, had been remade in love. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more timeless tales. See you next time.